Two abortion activists are now facing felony charges. The 21 and 26-year-old were arrested last week after being caught on video stealing pro-life signs. The two are also charged with violently resisting arrest at the University of Florida earlier this month. The stolen signs were part of a campaign by the pro-life group Created Equal. The author of a book about radical indoctrination and kids is speaking up after protesters crashed her book launch. The co-author of the book Stolen Youth: How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation was greeted with screaming slurs and hurled books at a launch party in New York City. And joining us now to talk more about this incident is co-author of that book, Bethany Mandel. Bethany, welcome. Great to be with you today. Tell us exactly what happened. I know you said these protesters attacked you and other attendees.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched our book early last week, and we had a book party with friends and family to celebrate. And we were in the back of a restaurant, and I was standing near the front with Steve Forbes of Forbes Media. And all of a sudden, I'm soaking wet. He's soaking wet. We've had books thrown at us, and we're sort of disoriented for a second. And then folks started screaming at us, Black Lives Matter, Trans Lives Matter. Thankfully, I was there actually with my 2-month-old baby, and a friend had just snatched him away for some snuggles across the room. So thank God he wasn't sort of collateral damage. But they, wanted to send a very clear message of intimidation that they were not fans of the book or our message. And that message came through loud and clear.
What were you thinking? I mean, what was going through your mind, especially having your baby there?
Yeah. I mean, truth be told, the first thing I did was look for him and make sure that he was safe and see sort of how many people were there. I mean, it was definitely that mom instinct, and that mom instinct led us to write Stolen Youth because we saw this sort of radical indoctrination that's happening to children. We saw children's safety at risk. And that same instinct sort of kicked in when, these protesters started throwing books at us. And I kind of just looked up and made sure that he was in a safe place and that my friend had him held safely.
I want to get to the book now. As you mentioned, it's called Stolen Youth, How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. Tell us more about the book and why you and your co-author, Carol Markowitz, why you guys decided to write this book.
Yeah. So we noticed a trend, across our children's lives. I'm a mom of 6. She's a mom of 3. And, they're all varying ages. And we noticed just a constant stream of content that was directed toward them that had a very clear message of indoctrination. So at my kid's pediatrician, for example, on the form, when my last 2 babies were born within the last 2 years, a question appeared on the form about their gender identity for my newborn. There's a lot of content that we've run into, both in digital media, sort of visual media like TV shows, but also in books that we've found that we're really deeply uncomfortable with. And this is something that Ron DeSantis is hitting in Florida, making sure that all the content that is in school libraries is safe and is age appropriate, because we encountered not age appropriate content. And so we sort of noticed a pattern that there was a consistent message directed towards children that they had to sort of assume this worldview. And we feared for, children's safety and their mental health. And so we decided, there are so many different angles at which this is coming, and people really have no idea. And, we didn't have as much of an idea until we started writing and reporting this book, how deep this sort of indoctrination goes. And so we decided, we have to make other parents aware of sort of the danger that's at play here for our children.
So what do you think? I mean, how can we as parents, protect our children from all this?
Yeah. So, I mean, that was a lot of why we wrote the book, too. I mean, a lot of it is you have to know what's happening. And so one of the most troubling examples that I talk about in Stolen Youth was a mother sent her child to a weekend sleepaway camp at a summer camp in California. And she asked, because she had heard rumors from other nearby school districts that they were housing children according to their gender identity, which meant that biological boys and men were housed in female bunks. And she was worried, and she contacted her school principal, and he kind of threw a lot of legalese language at her that made her feel intimidated, and she didn't follow up, and she deeply regretted it because then her child ended up spending the weekend in a cabin with a counselor who had facial hair, and her daughter came home scared. And, the message of that story was the mom really had to be proactive. She really had to be an advocate for her child, but she also had to know California state law, because when she confronted the school about it, they said, "We're sorry, our hands are tied. We had to house this counselor according to their gender identity, and so we put them in your daughter's bunk." And parents need to realize that the feelings of adults matter more than the safety of their children.
Bethany, we're almost out of time, but did you find out, what's behind all of this?
I mean, it's a radical sort of belief system that has sort of evolved over the course of the last 10 years. People call it cultural Marxism or wokeness. The definition doesn't really matter so much. What matters is there is a sort of emerging and really aggressive political ideology that is not popular. And so they've decided that the best sort of way that they can perpetuate this ideology is through our kids.
Well, Bethany, we're going to leave it right there. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you.